3 days before the invasion began, I was traveling as foreign minister, but I was on Messenger with my son, and he told me that something weird is happening on TikTok. And I said, what? What is going on? He said, TikTok is full, literally is flooded with all kinds of messages, videos about the invincibility of the Red Army, the Soviet Union army, and the Russian army. There is nothing about Ukraine in it, not a single word.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here with Mr. Minister at a time of great uncertainty. The ongoing war in Ukraine, and it's a 10-plus year, it's not a 3-year war. The ongoing war has reshaped our world, reshaped how we look at Europe, and it's really a real privilege to have this chance to have a discussion with one of the key figures from the last few years as minister from 2020 to 2024 in Ukraine. So really look forward to getting his perspective, not only on the conflict, but also to get his lessons from the experience, maybe some perspective on how things are going now, that you're free to speak about what's going on. So please join me in warmly welcoming the Mr. Minister. Before I turn the mic over and get into the conversation, I just want to take my hat off to you, Mr. Minister, and to the Ukrainian people who stood up in the winter of 2013-14 and have been standing up every day since then to Russia, to the aggression, not just for sovereignty and freedom of Ukraine, but I would say for the values of the West, for Europe, and for the United States. So I just want to say it's a real honor to be able to thank you and on your behalf, the Ukrainian people for all they've been doing. So with that, I'd really just like to look back a little bit and maybe get your lessons from your experience, standing up to a major power, standing up to Putin, standing up over the years as a minister. What was it like to engage in wartime diplomacy?
Thank you for your kind words, Henry, addressed to the people of Ukraine. Thank you for coming to listen to us and to ask questions. The theory of international relations kind of tells you that standing up to the super nuclear power that is much larger than you and seems to be much more resourced than you is a suicide by definition. And your main focus should be on avoiding the conflict, but if you failed and the conflict erupted, then the instinct should tell you to accept the terms imposed on you in order to win peace or a break from the invasion. So suffice to say that no one in the world believed that Ukraine would stand. The difference was in assessment was whether Ukraine would fall in 3 days, in 7 days, in 10, or in 2 weeks. That was everywhere. In Washington, in London, everywhere across the world, the position was the same. To be completely honest with you, even we were not certain that we would stand. But there are moments in life when you have to make choice. When there is nothing in between, everything is black and white. It's sink or swim. It's all in or all out. Literally, only the two edges are available to you. And we made our choice. It was kind of a leap of faith. So why did we make this choice? For a number of reasons. The first one is purely historical, because we as a generation felt responsibility for the country, knowing that our ancestors who had tried to stand up against Russia always failed. So this generation had the ambition to prove that we will be able to defend our country for the first time in centuries against the invasion from Moscow. The second reason was our understanding of Russia. And we knew, unlike many people in Western world and maybe here in Korea and Asian countries, we knew that Putin did not come after a piece of land or after making sure that Ukraine will never become a member of NATO. Putin came after whole of Ukraine, after all of us. So our understanding of compromise was very different from the same understanding among our friends. They were like saying, make concession and he will stop. And we were saying, he won't. We may make concessions, but everything we know about him is that he's not going to stop. Because you do not wake up in the morning and you say, I'm going to wage war against Ukraine, right? It's a process. He came to this conclusion. He understood the risks and what the war would potentially mean to him. So he was ready to bear the consequences. The third reason why we picked up the fight was something that Henry already alluded to. This war did not start in 2022. It started in 2014, and we knew one thing, that if all the right elements are in place, we can defeat Russia in battles. We have that capability, and we have the will to fight. The open question remains whether we are able to win Russia in wars, not just in specific battles. And history will give an answer to that question as well.
Thank you for that. That's really helpful to kind of understand where you're coming from and how you got here. I think I'm certainly curious, and I think folks are curious to get your perspective on the Trump-Putin meeting recently in Alaska. You talked about Putin's goal to take all of Ukraine. You're seeing conversations about how an end state should look, what a peace should look like, and that certainly was what Alaska was about. How do you understand that conversation, and how do you see diplomacy going forward? Again, going off the battlefield and into the diplomatic arena, and how does this evolve, and how does Ukraine get back into the conversation?
So let me try to explain something important by bringing it closer to where we currently are. And if you disagree with me, please feel free. I'm always happy to correct my mistakes, but that does not happen too often. Russia's approach to war today is similar, to me, to the approach of North Vietnam or North Korea during respective wars in this part of the world. For him, this is the war of will, or to be more precise, the war of wills. Who is going to outlast the enemy? Many framed this war as a war of attrition. But what I learned, getting back to the subject of our meeting, what I learned is that it's very hard to have a war of attrition in the 21st century, because you can always find someone who will come to help, and your resources will be refilled with help. Some resources are very hard are impossible to replenish, which is, for example, primarily human resource. But in principle, you can always find someone who will be sending weapons to you. So if this is not the war of attrition, we fight until one of us runs out of resources, what is that? And that is the war of wills. Putin believes that his will to take over Ukraine will eventually be stronger and prevail over the will of Ukrainians to defend themselves and the will of Ukraine's friends to help Ukraine defend itself. This is what it's all about. And it's absolutely crazy that more than 1 million people in Russia got killed and wounded in this war because President Putin wants a line in a history book which will describe him as the great Tsar of Russia, who returned Ukraine under Moscow's control. So, to your question, everything President Putin does in diplomacy, as of now, is buying time and shattering Ukraine's friends and assistance and undermining assistance that is coming to Ukraine. So this is why he went to Alaska. The purpose for him was very clear. He saw Trump escalating rhetorics. I'm pretty certain Russian intelligence reported to him that there are people close to Trump who are getting more and more traction with the president on taking tough action against Russia. So he wanted to play it down because he needs more time to conquer more territories. President Trump went to that meeting, in my view, because he was coming to the edge of where he had to take action against Putin. He was encircled domestically by people in his own administration, by people in the Congress, demanding Putin, elevating the pressure on him that he must take action against Russia. And he was looking for an opportunity to escape that trap. So he said, I'm doing diplomacy. I met with Putin. We have to put actions against Russia on the backfire. I mean, put it on hold. So there was a lot of noise. We live in a world of a lot of noise, right? But there was a lot of noise around Alaska. But if you try to look at it in a purely diplomatic way, of the goals, the objectives that both sides pursued in this meeting, they left Alaska. Both of them were satisfied because both of them achieved what they were looking for. So the problem is that everyone gets agitated with every piece of diplomacy that is taking place about Ukraine. But wait for 24 hours after an event or conversation is over, and you realize that we are still exactly where we were 24 hours ago. So unfortunately, there is no correlation between diplomacy and the situation on the front line and the war. Just this night, there was another massive attack on Kiev, and my daughter called me at 4 o'clock in the morning Kiev time, saying that it's too loud and she cannot sleep. So in the end, of course, there will be a ceasefire. There will be an end to the war because all wars end in the end. But it's not in sight. It's not looming on the horizon. We are very far away from it.
Thanks very much for that. Just if I could just push a little more on that. So you're talking about the U.S. and Russian perspective on diplomatic activity. You're saying that nothing changes as you know, it just goes back to the war, offered the very human perspective of what's really happening, that there are these attacks going on. How does President Zelensky get into this conversation? So as the movement goes towards a ceasefire, as there is some movement toward an end, how does it get out of a conversation between the United States and Russia and involve the Ukrainians more?
Well, if you said in the end of 2022 or early 2023 that you were ready to stop along the current line of conduct, the front line, and engage in talks afterwards, the chances were very high that you would be either stoned on the street or charged with treason. This was the level of expectations in Ukraine. Because as a result of our successes in 2022, the threshold of expectations was so high that people wanted like total victory over Russia. Yeah, we will push them back, we will liberate our territories, Russia is going to collapse, we will live happily ever after. Well, it didn't work that way for a number of reasons. So what you're hearing today is actually what was completely unacceptable 3 years ago. we are ready to stop where we are. We will not recognize the loss of these territories in legal terms, but we will engage in a conversation. Just leave us alone. A big part of this solution is Ukraine becoming a member of the European Union and Ukraine building a special military partnership with the United States of America and European nations. So basically, you don't have the European Union in Asia, but you know what special military partnership means for strengthening your own security. So on the security track, something like the South Korea-American relationship is what Ukraine is looking at. So public opinion is ready to accept that solution. But the problem is that Putin continues to believe, and President Zelensky knows that. But the problem is that President Putin believes that he is 1 mile away from getting it all. So why should he make a concession now if his calculation is that he will get everything without conceding anything? It's just a matter of time. So this is the challenge that we are facing today. That while Ukrainian public opinion is ready to make painful but necessary concessions to end the war, and President Zelensky knows that he can pursue that he can move on in that direction. Russia takes it as a sign of weakness and only doubles down.
That's a tough message, but thanks for that. Maybe change topic before looking to you for the audience for some questions. And the change of topic is another form of warfare, perhaps, that you've written a lot about. It's disinformation. And, you've beyond reacting, so I'd like to get your views on that, beyond reacting to disinformation and just batting down the false narratives that are coming out, what are some effective strategies that you put into place that were able to be effective to keep Ukraine resilient from the disinformation attacks, which are really acts of war from Russia, in addition to the physical war?
So let me share one observation with you first. Unfortunately, you do not. In some cases, you do not need disinformation attack to lose your cause and not being able to defend yourself. And unfortunately, it is even more unfortunate that it mostly applies to wealthy countries. So the instinct tells you that the wealthier you are, the more protective of your wealth you become, right? But the reality is exactly the opposite. The wealthier the country is, the more reluctant its citizens are to defend the country. This is what we observe in Germany, for example, that has embarked on the biggest program of military rearmament since the Second World War, since pre-Second World War times, to the extent that even President Macron of France made a joke that Germany is rearming again, but this is the first time France is not worried. But Germans realize that they will have more tanks and planes and ships than the crewmen to drive them. Because German society is psychologically unprepared for the war. So you do not even need to attack them with disinformation in order to demotivate them from defending their country, because they are already there. And of course, if you listen to a German officials whom I highly respect, they will tell you that they're taking measures and that there are history lessons that needs to be taken into account. All of this will be true, but the fact is that the war does not wait for you to learn your history lessons. When the war comes, as I said, you are either in or out. And in the first 3 months of the war, What matters is the will of your nation to fight, of your citizens. If you do not demonstrate that will in the first 3 months, your cause is most probably lost. But after the first 3 months of the war, the will of the people to fight becomes less important, but it gets more ugly, because what really matters is the ability of the state to incentivize and coerce citizens into the war, which will be a big issue for democracies, of course. When it comes to disinformation, the main message that the country that wants to attack you, the main two messages that the country that wants to attack you is going to spread is, first, it doesn't make sense to resist. And second, they will focus on the issues which are directly unrelated to the war, but which are dividing your society. Politics, I don't know, corruption, any societal issue that bothers you, they will stick their finger into your wound and will start tearing it apart. The goal is to polarize. The goal is to divide, is to make you weaker, to shift focus from the war to domestic issues, from the need to defend your country. 3 days before the invasion began, I was traveling as foreign minister, but I was on Messenger with my son, who was 14 years old back then. And he told me, something strange is, and he texted to me, Dad, something weird is happening on TikTok. Because that's where they all are, right? On TikTok. And I said, what? What is going on? He said, TikTok is full, literally, is flooded with all kinds of messages, videos about the invincibility of the Red Army, the Soviet Union Army, and the Russian Army. There is nothing about Ukraine in it, not a single word. It's just glorifying the heroism and invincibility of the Red Army. It's a very uncommon subject for TikTok, right? That's not exactly what this social platform is famous for. But it was a deliberate flooding to disincentivize you, to demoralize you. Like, we're going to win anyway. Why try to resist you? Even now, Ukraine is suffering enormously from the situation that I mentioned from the second case, when we're a democratic society, right? We talk, we make arguments, we fight, not as much as we did before the war. We consume freedom of speech in a more responsible way now, but still, we are a democracy. So every time there is an issue, Russian bloggers, Russian channels on Telegram are there, Russian bot farms with comments. And of course, the most dividing issue today, after 3 years of war in Ukraine, is mobilization. And they are working really hard to represent mobilization as a crime of the state against a human being. So what do you do with that? You cannot remain entirely liberal while fighting against disinformation of that kind. So when it comes to defending your national security, you have to be tough. You have to shut down media. You have to take down bloggers from and accounts from social media. You have to build a wall. It's extremely difficult in the 21st century, but I think specifically for Korea, where nation still remembers its history and lives next to a very perilous neighbor, that is possible, and you have to act in a responsible way.
Well, I just want to say that, I mean, the work that you did in 2022, but also in 2014 to counter the disinformation that was trying to sell the story that it was inevitable, victory was inevitable, I think is just really impressive and a testament to these efforts of controlling the message and making sure that the good message gets out, the optimistic message comes out. I'd like to turn to the audience to give a chance to ask the minister questions here in the last minutes.
My name is Anton, and I'm curious, what is the current situation in AI and drones playing a part in the modern war? I think it's going into this direction more and more. I wonder what it is for Korea, what it is for other countries, how people share the information or, transition to this type of game being played.
So the front line of active engagement in Ukraine today is, let's say, around 900 kilometers or so. The border between Russia and Ukraine is 3,000 kilometers or roughly, and every part of that border can instantly become a front line. The kill zone that is calculated from the front line deep into the territory you control varies between 10 and 20 kilometers depending on the drones and the quantity of them available to you. What does it mean in practice? It means that anything and anyone who shows up 10, 15 kilometers from the actual combat zone instantly gets killed or destroyed. The only question is by both sides. If you follow the war in Ukraine, you may have seen already unimaginable videos of a road covered with a net. So there is a road, like you drive your car on, and there are piles every 50 meters installed along the road for thousands of kilometers. And a very simple fish net is stretched above the road. Very simple prehistoric technology. And the purpose of that is very simple, because the drone will explode before hitting the car after getting in contact with the net. But can you imagine highways covered with webs, with fish webs across the country? That's very difficult, but look it up and you will see it is already the case in Ukraine. So when it comes to drones, the only question is how deep their reach out will be, because it will paralyze economic activity. You simply cannot live in a place within access of a frontline drone. I'm not now talking about drones like Shaheds, like the ones that attack Kyiv and other cities. This is a different story. So what happens when both sides will effectively create a demilitarized zone by establishing 100% control over what is happening in that territory, and how deep that will get? This is the most tricky question about the development. Second, there are only two big issues in drone industry when it comes to the front line, when it comes to the real war. It's autonomy, and many think of autonomy in terms of drone not being piloted by someone, but autonomy primarily addresses the question of drones operation and precision in GPS denied environment. So how do you actually make the drone reach the target when it's jammed? The efficiency rate of drones, you hear a lot about drone war, but the efficiency rate of drones is about 10%, which means out of every 10 drones you send to hit the target, only one makes it. And autonomy is fundamental to resolve this problem and increase efficiency. And the second fundamental problem in drone industry is propulsion. So how do you make it fly faster and longer? And both of these problems will be resolved, which means that no one, nowhere will feel safe. It's just a matter of time. And not allowing this mutual self-destruction will be an issue of political arrangement. Putin is destroying our electricity plants and cities. We are destroying his refineries, located hundreds of kilometers deep in Russia. And both of us will develop the capability to destroy even more on each side. So drone war seems to be a zero-sum war in the end. Of course, if you have the equivalent number of if you have capabilities equivalent to the ones of your enemy. But AI, autonomy and propulsion. If you speak to drone producers, these are the two big things they are working on. For a man on the front line, the only the real issue is not the drone; it's the everything anti-drone. And this is the third big subject. Everyone is talking about drones, but actually the demand for anti-drone solution is even higher today than the demand for drone solutions.
Thank you very much for that. Before we wrap up, I really liked you were talking earlier a little bit about optimism, and I've heard you speak previously about your views on pessimism and your quote from Eisenhower. I'm wondering if you could maybe end and tell folks a little bit about how you feel about pessimism and how you keep optimistic in light of all of these. You painted a pretty bleak picture of what's going on, of the new types of warfare, what's at stake. Can you maybe end on an optimistic note?
Easy. When the war started, and it was pretty tough, so you can imagine. You are attacked by a country like Russia. No one believes in you. My family. I evacuated my family, but I stayed in Ukraine doing my job. You need a source of inspiration, right? You need something that will cheer you up. And somehow, it's not that I was deliberately looking for that, but somehow two quotes ended up in my notes on smartphone, iPhone. I was reading different things and I just bumped into them. So, and the first one comes from General Eisenhower, and the President of the United States, who said, "Pessimists never won a war." So it doesn't matter how bad the situation is, you have to be an optimist. But I also believe that you have to be reality-based optimist. So to make the right decisions, you have to understand the things right. And the second quote is attributed to John Lennon, although I'm not sure he actually said it. I think John Lennon is the second most misquoted person in the world after Winston Churchill, but I loved the line. In the end, everything will be fine. And if it is not the end, if it is not fine, then this is not the end.
Well, thanks a lot for that. I think that's a great way to end, and I just want to thank you very much for this conversation, and give a warm round of applause.